Okay. So what basically I wanted to talk about different forms of uncertainty relations in the sense the way it got evolved, and then connections with other foundational aspects which are directly related to quantum technology today. So let me just start with whatever we know. It's really well known in the sense that everybody has some kind of t-shirts and with these kind of prints and all that. Whether we understand or not, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is something which is known to everybody. But then how much do we know is the question. So he had told us that the outcomes of measurements of non-commuting observables cannot be predicted accurately, or the more precise the measurement of position, the more imprecise the measurement of momentum, and so on. So this is what is the kind of culmination of what is Copenhagen interpretation, and their interpretation seems to be like some Shila Shasan or something written on the stone. We regard quantum mechanics as a complete theory for which the fundamental physical and mathematical hypotheses are no longer susceptible to modification. That's the kind of statement. And as we know, this is David Mermin says he was in the first kind of initial batches of quantum mechanics students at Harvard University. And he says, my teachers seem to be Copenhagen agents. They would always say, don't ask questions. So if I were forced to sum up in one sentence what the Copenhagen interpretation says to me, it would be shut up and calculate. But he didn't. As we know, he didn't shut up. He did contribute to quantum computing. His book is very well known. So let me just go ahead with Heisenberg's original paper. It showed kind of what is the derivation of his uncertainty principle. It really did not have commutator QP, but it had this kind of arguments which lead to this H bar minus IH bar kind of a idea. So how did he go ahead with this is what is the thought. That is, he had outlined his new principle in his 14-page letter to Pauli, and in February 23rd, and in March he submitted his paper on uncertainty principle for publication. So these are today known as preparation uncertainty relations. That is, for any wave function psi, what is a preparatory uncertainty relation? So we have a distribution for Q, that is, if I am measuring Q position, there is a distribution, probability distribution. Width of that distribution and width of P distribution is approximately H bar. That is to say, approximately. Heisenberg discussed a Gaussian wave packet. So what is a Gaussian wave packet? It looks like this. So I have e to the minus something like this, and its corresponding probability distribution will have a psi mod squared, or it is half into x minus a whole squared sigma. Now, if I check mean x is a, and what is it? Variance. Variance happens to be sigma squared. That's what we have. And corresponding, if I take a Fourier transform of this and find what is the momentum wave function, it would have a kind of, there is a lambda coming here, and if I calculate it, I will naturally get a h bar by 2 for this Gaussian wave function. That is, variances multiplied will give me h bar squared by 4 the moment I take a Fourier transform. This example initiated a mathematically formal version of preparation uncertainty relation for position and momentum later on. But Heisenberg had only indicated Gaussian wave packet. It's not for any wave function that we have. So this is the kind of picture. If I know where I am, my momentum gets distributed. That is, measurement of momentum becomes imprecise. This all of us know. But what is that Heisenberg presented? He only presented the physical intuition underlying the uncertainty principle. So he gave a kind of Gedanken experiment, thought experiment, where the discussion of a gamma ray microscope for measuring position and momentum of the electron. So he would say measurement of position of the particle with an error, that is, there is an error inevitable. This error, he says, it is delta x, and he says delta x corresponds to wavelength of the photon used to measure the position. So this causes a disturbance eta p of the momentum, and this eta p is shown to be h divided by delta x. So this is kind of hand waving like arguments, but anybody can kind of take it. It's correct. It's some kind of in a semi-classical tone that Heisenberg had written it. So the product of noise in position measurement and the momentum disturbance, there is a error and there is a disturbance. This caused by what measurement turns out to be error into disturbance is roughly h. So while Heisenberg states that he would prove the error disturbance relation by in terms of commutator, he did not do it. So there was no mathematical definition of what is a error, what is a disturbance in his paper. So now what could be his reasoning? Any measurement disturbs the object. That means there is kind of uncontrollable state change is inevitable when you have a measurement. So now measurements disturb each other. If there are two measurements, they would interfere with each other. So this is what we today call as quantum incompatibility. So now with that, one formulates what is called as a measurement uncertainty relation, and measurement uncertainty relation gives you, if I define what is called error in Q measurement into error in P measurement, these are called measurement uncertainty relations for error. This is error is roughly h bar, and error in Q, disturbance in P, that is also h bar. These are real examples of measurement uncertainty relations formulated. So now what in the paper, that is later on what came out, true to the style of the time, that is Bohr's time, the main discussion is semi-classical. This is about Heisenberg's paper. Heisenberg gives a rough discussion of variances of Gaussian wave packets in the position measurement and resulting momentum disturbance. And this example initiated a mathematically formal version of preparation uncertainty relation. That is, I have only told you that there are two kinds, but when Heisenberg talked about it, how it went ahead in history. So people defined what kind of a preparation uncertainty relation could come out in a more mathematically precise way. This was first done by Kennard in 27 itself, but he gave a usual, what is familiar to us, delta Q into delta P is greater than or equal to h bar by 2. So anyway, delta Q, delta P, you know, these are standard deviations. And then if I take this, if at all I take two non-commuting observables, then I have this kind of a relation. That is, delta A into delta B is greater than or equal to half into expectation value of modulus of AB commutator. So Heisenberg did not state this, but it was all inherent in a sense, but nobody can prove that it's Heisenberg's paper which gave this. So for any two non-commuting observables, this was presented, this relation was presented by Robertson in 1929. Robertson was inspired by some argument, I don't know which argument, which was given in Wales' book which was published in 28. So formally, the error, how do we express error? It is some kind of a, what is delta A? That is A squared minus A squared expectation value minus A expectation value whole squared. This is what is the standard deviation, as we know. Generally, one does that. So textbooks in quantum mechanics exclusively discuss the preparation uncertainty relation of Kennard, Weil, Robertson, all that put together. So now there is, are we reading Heisenberg's thoughts in a proper manner? This is a colloquium in 2024 in Reviews of Modern Physics. What are measurement uncertainty relations and how to interpret Heisenberg's original thought on error and disturbance? These things were very well kind of explained in this RMP in 2014. So there are several references that I give which kind of give you all these overview of this measurement uncertainty relations and kind of which claim that this is original Heisenberg's thought kind of things. So now let us come to what was formulated by Ozawa as measurement uncertainty relation. So Heisenberg's intuitive arguments are presented by Ozawa in this particular way. Ozawa says, if I have an error in measurement of A and disturbance in the measurement of B, they satisfy similar whatever was given by Robertson. This is the relation, but here I don't have standard deviation of A and standard deviation of B. I need to define what is error and what is disturbance. So what is error here? It is a root mean square again for some quantity called as operator called as NA squared. It is root of NA squared, that is NA squared expectation value root. So, and the noise operator is defined as noise, whatever is the noise operator that we have taken here, that is nothing but there is a measurement that I am trying to do on observable A, call that as MA, and there is my observable A of 0. There is an apparatus, there is a system, and system's observable is A, but I do a measurement interaction, that is what is U of tau. So there is a short time that is involved in the measurement process itself. So if I do a U of tau measurement unitary, so it acts on MA, what is the observable that I choose for the measurement of A. So MA of tau that is written here is this one, and how much it differs from my observable A which I want to measure, A of 0. So that is what is called as noise in the measurement. So if I choose this exactly equal to F0, then I don't have any noise. Is that possible? Is there a relation? That's what one can ask. So now measurement interaction is some interaction that I take. I choose it appropriately so that disturbance is reduced, error is reduced kind of thing. So now A of 0 is nothing but it is a two Hilbert spaces. One is system Hilbert space, one is measurement apparatus Hilbert space. So A is a system, I is identity for measurement apparatus system. So what is an accurate measurement? If expectation value of the NA, that is what we called as MA of tau minus A of 0. If this is equal to this always for my system, if that is 0, then there is an accurate measurement. And correspondingly, what I say, epsilon A, that is the variance or square root of variance, because if I choose NA to be 0, then NA squared minus expectation value of NA will be there. NA will be 0. Let us say I choose always an accurate measurement, and this is my some variance to the power half, that is standard deviation. So if I take that, correspondingly, this is whatever I have. So error free means I should have this also to be 0. Do we have that is the question. So now disturbance operator dB is what I need to define. Suppose I did a measurement on A, but how much does it cause disturbance in the measurement of B? So dB is defined as there is a B of 0. Originally I have a B, or which is actual B. But after interaction, I have a B of tau. This B of tau is consisting of the interaction U dagger tau, U of tau. What is U of tau? It's an interaction required to measure A, not B. It is a measurement on A. But then B gets disturbed. So B of tau minus B of 0 is what is called as the disturbance operator. So this disturbance, what I call as disturbance, is dB squared, that is a standard deviation in this. So a measurement of the operator is free of disturbance if I have eta B is 0. And error disturbance relation is claimed to be this. I don't know. Nobody proved it. This is supposed to quantify the trade-off between error disturbance in a measurement process. So now what Ozawa showed is, if you have a error disturbance, what is the relation that you get? They wanted to prove it. So now Ozawa's relation is consider the commutator of NA dB. NA is noise, D is the disturbance. So what is NA? NA is MA of tau minus A of 0. dB is B of tau minus B of 0. I can write it in the following way. That is, I write A of 0, B of 0 as one thing here, and then I will write other things. That is A of 0 with B of tau, B of 0, and MA of tau with, that is, if you simplify this, you will get whatever I have written in the first line, and then I will use the relation MA of tau commutator with B of tau is 0. Why? Because MA of tau is U dagger U with MA here in the second place and B is in the first place. So these two commute. So I will use that relation, and also A of 0 with B of 0 is nothing but A commutator B tensor product identity in the apparatus space. With that, we can now use a relation between complex variables. That is, this is the most general inequality. Z1 modulus minus Z2 modulus is less than or equal to Z1 plus or minus Z2 modulus. This is less than or equal to Z1 plus Z2. Where is a complex variable now? I will take NADB expectation value and work on what is modulus of that. That contains how many terms are there? There are 1, 2, and 3 terms are there. And when I write an expectation value, I expect it to be modulus of this expectation value follows this relation. And if I work it out, if I write this and work it out, there is a greater than or equal to, that is NADB that I have written here, that is greater than or equal to, which means I am going to use a relation, this Z1 plus Z2 is greater than kind of thing. So which gives me this particular relation, and I rearrange terms, and then I am going to get this relation. So Robertson's preparation uncertainty relation holds good for everything. Suppose I have a system and apparatus, whole Hilbert space. In that case, I can use Robertson's relation. So what I want is error and disturbance uncertainty relation. Now I have a relation which is written here. I will now write NADB error and this operator NA, operator DB obey what is called as Robertson's preparation uncertainty relation, and delta A and delta B obey this relation, delta NA, delta B obey this relation. This is coming from our preparation uncertainty relation. This leads me to replace NADB into delta NA, delta DB, because I anyway have a greater than or equal to. This is always greater than or equal to NADB. So I replace it, plus delta A, delta B, I write that, plus delta NA, delta B, that is greater than or equal to half into delta AB will turn out naturally if you work it out in detail. So with this, we use what is this error? Error is nothing but delta NA. Error is greater than delta NA rather, because error is NA to the power NA squared expectation value to the power of half. But delta NA is NA squared expectation value minus NA expectation value whole squared. So there is a relation like this. So all this kept in proper track leads me to this relation basically. Okay. So Ozawa wanted to prove this relation. That's what is the proof. But ignore these two terms, because what Heisenberg said, what you would interpret is error into disturbance should be related to A commutator B. So you only take this. That means you interpret that this is itself is Heisenberg's uncertainty relation. If that is the case, then you do a experiment to check it. So this was done in 2012 and also 2013, and it highlighted that experimentally Heisenberg's error disturbance uncertainty relation is violated. That means if I write epsilon A into eta B is greater than or equal to half AB commutator modulus, expectation value modulus, it gets violated. That's what is said. So Do you have any kind of solution for this, or is this right, this way of doing it? Any questions? I hope you are following what I am saying. So what I want to say is this is the correct relation. Okay. If you say that Heisenberg meant only this, epsilon A eta B is greater than or equal to half into AB commutator expectation value modulus. If you say that, that gets violated actually. But there was a lot of kind of, this led to so much of discussion in literature, because experimentally Heisenberg's error disturbance relation is violated. That's what was publicized. So there are several references which you may like to look at, very interesting references. Oh, these papers are make a very interesting reading, so you may check on it. So then I will just talk about how this was taken by I think Pekka Lahti was one of Heisenberg's grandson as far as academics is concerned. They were all trying to, he was saying, no, 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 this is not uncertainty, error uncertainty. So they got together, Paul Bush, Werner, and Lahti got together, and they started discussing what is this uncertainty relation. So let me just mention to you, this is what they say, uncertainty from Heisenberg to today, how one interpreted what is Heisenberg's uncertainty relation, and how it evolved into today's, today means when they wrote it. So this is something like, I will just say, what about historical accuracy is they what ask, is the idea Heisenberg's? That's what they ask. So now what we took, root mean square error is epsilon A, that is Na squared to the power of half, and Na is Ma tau minus A0. And what is disturbance? Disturbance is B of tau minus P of 0, where B is changed because of measurement on A. That's what we have. And eta B, that is disturbance, is what is standard, whatever, dB squared expectation value to the power of half. So now you have two such things, Ma tau and A of 0 in one thing. And if you want to measure whole squared of that, Ma tau minus A of 0, it has the form A minus B. This is 1, this is 1. So can you measure A minus B squared? Is the question. If you want to measure A minus B squared, it requires setting up a measurement for which the probability of outcomes in the interval is given by expectation value of spectral projection of A minus B. I have to take A minus B together and find a spectral projection, and that spectral projection should be my measurement apparatus. So there is no direct way of implementing this. Given A and B, given only A and B, what is A? A is this Ma of tau, B is A of 0. So if you fix the apparatus already, then you don't have a spectral measurement. So it is some kind of controversy here. So in any case, such a measurement is not compatible. In what sense? If the observables Ma of tau and A of 0, do they commute? We are not sure. So if they commute, they are compatible. Otherwise, they are not compatible, is what these people say. In other words, the error refers to measurement incompatibility of A and B. A is this, B is this. I am emphasizing, not A and B of commutators. But this is what they mention. So the words error and disturbance are misnomers, is what they say. Though it looks very, very clean and empathetic, that is very emphatic, but these people say it is misnomers. These are misnomers. What they tell us is, suppose I do a measurement of Q alone, then I have there is a proper width there, delta rho Q, and there is a delta rho P. But I have to do delta rho Q, fine, but after this measurement, I will get a q prime. It's not the same q, but I get a different q. Call it as q prime. And the distribution is very different because I am also measuring p also. So p measurement gives me p prime. So I get a delta q prime, delta p prime. For that, you need to write the uncertainty, is what these people say. They have several papers on it. I'm not going to say everything, but what I want to say is they use the word compatible and they've used some kind of joint measurability that became more and more used in the literature. And I don't know how many of you are very familiar, but most of us are know this kind of joint measurability and POVMs and all kinds of things. So I will just give you a introduction of that in this lecture. So what is measurement incompatibility? We want to talk about POV observables and unsharp measurements. So what is compatible then? EPR steering and joint measurability, how they are related. These are things which are progresses in our literature, which have helped us to understand several things. So then we have entropic relation and in the presence of quantum memory, which is very crucial for understanding quantum cryptography, key rate and other things. So now we say in the classical world, we have physical observables commute with each other and they can all be jointly measured. But in the quantum scenario, measurement of observables which do not commute, we declare them as incompatible. At a first sight, I will say incompatibility is non-commutativity. But commuting observables, then they can always be measured jointly using projective valued measurements. That is, if two observables commute, I do have projection measurements and I can get their statistical outcomes without disturbing each other. And these outcomes can be called classical outcomes, and I can do kind of a classical probability theory results. I am doing classical statistical observations whenever I have commuting observables. And a joint measurement of commuting observables means I have only one measurement. I can produce the results of both the observables. That is, I have compatible measurements. I have what is A, B, both are inputted, I get outputs. That is, commuting measurements have simultaneous eigenstates. This we know. So simultaneous eigenstates become our instruments for measuring A and B. So I don't have two different projective measurements. I have only one projective measurement, simultaneous projective measurement. And then I get the results of both. So I will say there is one grand measurement apparatus which gives me output for both. The joint device is the same. I have a joint device. I need not measure any two observables separately if they are commuting with each other. Now, let us say if I have non-commuting restrictions on how sharply two non-commuting observables can be measured jointly. So if I do projective measurements, can I measure them jointly is the question. So is it possible to have joint unsharp measurements? So this leads us to the question, what are sharp and unsharp measurements? So it is an extended framework beyond projective valued measurements. So we have what is a positive operator valued measure. So this was first done by Ludwig and then by Davis, Hellstrom, Holevo, and a notion of joint measurement of non-commuting observables was formulated in Hilbert space formalism of quantum mechanics. And this orthodox notion of sharp projection valued measurements of observables, this gets broadened to include unsharp measurements of POV observables. I will explain it. That is, we only have projection valued measurements, but I extend it to have measurements of the observables using what are called as POV observables, but this is not called sharp. This is something like unsharp. So there are several references for this, but I will tell you how do we define this POV observable. This is a collection of positive self-adjoint operators in the Hilbert space of our system. That is, there is a Hilbert space of our system. I take a positive self-adjoint operator such that they lie between 0 and 1. There is a x there, and x takes different values. It's a set of such operators which are called effects. And these effects satisfy the condition sum of E over X is identity. It's something like if I take a projective measurement, sum on all projective measurement gives me identity. Difference here is this E is a positive self-adjoint operator set of them. E squared is not equal to E like our projection measurements. So now if I take this, a quantum system, if it is prepared in the state row, measurement of this observable E of X gives an outcome X with probability trace row Ex. This is Bond's rule. And then I take two observables, let us say, because when I have to measure two observables and want to know if they can be measured jointly, I need to take a set of two observables. So let me take two observables, Ei, Xi. What is the meaning of it? We will come later. But right now I am taking two POV observables. So let us say Xi, Ei, Xi, I is 1, 2. So these two POVMs are said to be jointly measurable if there exists what is called as a joint measurement, that is called a global POVM. What is a global POVM? I call this as one has E1 X1, other one as E2 X2. I will define a POVM which contains both X1 and X2. Where is it? This joint POVM is also in my Hilbert space. This G of X1 X2 is such that G of X1 X2, I called it as lambda. G of X1 X2 is positive. It is self-adjoint, and sum over G of X1 X2 is identity. Here I have denoted it as X1 X2. If that is the case, there exists a G of X1 X2 such that if I sum over G of X1 X2 over X2 outcomes of only X second POVM, then I am going to get E1 of X1. If I sum over X1, I am going to get a POVM of X2. So that is, there is a parent POVM which exists giving me separate POVMs. Then we say that the two observables, POV observables, they are jointly measurable. So with that, we say if the effects can be expressed in this particular way, it's a generalized form. Let me not focus more on this mathematics, but then I will call it as what is jointly measurable. Or in other words, G is a common measurement device, like how I showed you simultaneous eigenstates for commuting observables. We have a generalized theory where we have a joint measurement device which is enriched by the definition of POV observables, and I have a POV observable where I have a grand POVM which takes, for example, dichotomic values, let us say 1, 1, 1 minus 1, 1. Okay, I think I have written it 1 minus 1, minus 1, 1, and minus 1, minus 1. If I take sum of these two results, what I get a E1 of plus 1. This gives me E2 of plus 1. I can get the results of E1 and E2 by a joint measurement. That is called jointly measurable. So this is what is compatibility, and exists a joint measurement. So this is not a sharp measurement in the sense that I don't get each measurement with precision, but I can measure both of them compatibly in a joint way. That's what is the idea. So with that, we can talk about a global observable for three observables A, B, C, but A, B, C are jointly measurable. This implies that A and C can be measured, B and if at all A and C can be measured, B and C can be measured, B and A can be measured. But if at all A and C are measured jointly, A and B are measured jointly, B and C are measured jointly, this does not imply A, B, C are compatible. Several such results can come out when we take AB, BC, AC, and many more such things. These are some kind of mathematically very illuminating kind of results in joint measurability. So now I come back to error disturbance relation. So Heisenberg spirit materialized by who say they are descendants. So they say that there is a global joint observable, and I am measuring my observables A and B using the apparatus C and D. So these observables A, C and D should be compatible. First thing that they insist, that they should be compatible. Otherwise, I can't measure A and B. Choose C and D to be POVMs which are compatible, and then talk about error uncertainty relation, error noise, whatever. Then you do have a spirit of Heisenberg, is what they say. C and D are used to infer about A and B. So if you have joint measurement errors for A and B, this is like our preparation uncertainty. So then I get our incompatibility. But this, how to interpret it, I'm not going into the details of it, but this is kind of detailed understanding of how we use our uncertainty relations. So I will, let me see. So now let us say why it is called unsharp measurement. I will just introduce that. For example, I take simplest case of qubit observables. So we know that a qubit projection measurement is given by half into identity plus or minus sigma x. That gives me x measurement. If we write it, it's going to be a pure state projection of plus back to back plus. That is, plus projector is coming from this way of formulating it with eta is equal to 1. So now I introduce a eta here and call it a POVM. And now what happens? This is a positive operator and positive self-adjoint operator. It can be called as our POV observable. And if I add plus and minus, I am going to get identity. It satisfies all the requirements of a POV observable. Similarly, I define EZ, that is for the other observable. I define this. So this is eta here lies between 0 and 1, so that my EX and EZ are positive. So this eta is called sharpness measurement. And from the construction itself, you know that eta is equal to 1 gives you sharp measurement. That is, it's a projective measurement. Let's say projective measurement is a sharp measurement. Now the question is sharp measurement possible for two non-commuting observables? Answer is no. But what I have to do is prepare a POVM so that at least I can measure them jointly. Otherwise, joint measurement is not allowed in quantum theory. So now, what is joint measurability of sigma x and sigma z? It requires eta should be less than or equal to 1 over root 2 is the theory. Without proving, I am stating it. Because if I want to construct a global grandfather POVM, or let us say father POVM, this is G xz. I write it like this, whatever I have written here. This, if you write as a matrix, this is positive. But if I write the eta is 1 over root 2 here, if you take beyond 1 over root 2, let us say eta is 1 here, g of xz becomes negative. So there is no global POVM. If global POVM has to satisfy all the conditions, it should be positive, it should be self-adjoint, it should add to give you identity. So, but this satisfies self-adjointness, it satisfies sums over identity, but it's not positive. If eta is greater than 1 over root 2. This is an example. So joint measurability of three orthogonal spin components, x, y, z all together, it implies that eta is less than or equal to 1 over root 3. So we have some kind of different relations on these joint measurability. So now if we take, say, kind of trine axis, that is each one making some 120 degrees. So we do get 2 by 3 as our n is equal to 3 measurements. This is 2 by 3 and so many things. People have worked on these things. I wanted to say something that was Sibashish Ghosh and Ravi Kunjwal long back, but this is something where they derived that the joint measurability necessary condition can be formulated, sufficient condition can be formulated. If necessary and sufficient condition are equal, you get eta is equal to kind of a relation for any joint measurability. Otherwise, you are only going to get it is greater than this kind of a relation for joint measurability. So now this is one of our papers where we try to do, that is, though it has some other thing, but what we try to do is take a sigma theta k, which is sigma x cos theta k plus sigma y sin theta k. What is theta k? I want to divide it in the equatorial plane equally. So it is k pi by n. K is equal to 1 to up to n. If there are n measurements, I will take n such things. Now, if I wanted to calculate what is joint measurability, we could prove that necessary and sufficient conditions are equal. So we got eta optimal is given by this kind of a formula. So now we wanted to check what is this formula. It kind of gives us something like this. It is 0.663400. It kind of looks like it is converging. Then we figured out it is nothing but 2 by pi basically. It is 2 by pi, and if I take, it is one more result which says if I take not equatorial plane but the entire Bloch sphere, the result for joint measurability turns out to be half, that is 0.5. This is still larger than that. So that kind of relations are important. So now I come to some observation which is again previous what was foundationally important. Wolf et al. Said that incompatible measurements of a pair of POVMs with dichotomic outcomes are necessary and sufficient for the violation of standard 4-term CHSH Bell inequality. What do they say? So if I take 4-term Bell inequality, it gets violated by an entangled state. But what about measurements? Am I doing measurements which are compatible? I have a prime, I have a B prime at Alice and Bob's end. Suppose I choose A and A prime to be compatible. In the sense, I have a global POVM to measure Alice's A and A prime. What will be my result? Even if they share an entangled state, a result will show that Bell inequality is not violated. That means joint measurability is equivalent to non-violation of CHSH Bell inequality. So now that's what is written here. I don't know how long can I go, but if you tell me, I will arrange my talk according to that. So do I have another 15 minutes? Anyway, I will go ahead. So this is what is derivation of how one obtained 1 over root 2. Let me not talk about it.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah, you have 15 minutes.
How many? 10, 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So now, if I write this, people did this kind of what is unsharpness. That is what decides compatibility. This was done even in probabilistic theories, post-quantum theories or probabilistic, generalized probability theories. So they showed that if I take GPT, generalized probability theory, eta optimal, that is what is the necessary and sufficient condition for the violation of CHSH relation, it gives you half. And what is quantum? It's 1 by root 2. And what is classical? It is 1. So you have kind of 4-term CHSH inequality and joint measurability. Somehow, this little toy model seems to give you, here it is a broader range. Quantum mechanics is in between. Classical and general probability theories are more and more. They become fuzzier. Eta large means fuzziness is increased. So that's the kind of thing. So do classical feature emerge in general when one merely confines to measurements of compatible unsharp POVMs? Yes. If you take only compatible POVMs, you don't see any quantum features, it looks like. So is it possible to classify physical theories based on the fuzziness necessitated by joint measurability? These are questions still being probed. According to me, I do have some questions on this about algebraic maximum of the inequality, and so on and so forth. So now I will just, again, many of you may know, but I don't know who is my audience. So I prepared it according to what I thought is useful for a program like this. So I would like to say something about connection between EPR steering and joint measurability. So let me tell you the kind of overall idea about of steering. So we all know that if I have entangled states, Alice and Bob share a entangled pair, the ability to non-locally alter the states of one part of a composite system by performing measurements on another space-like separated part. This is what Schrodinger introduced. He called it as steering. But measurements were not done or experiments were not done. Bell non-locality was explored, but steering was kind of, it was still waiting for people to focus on. So what I want to say is, if I do a measurement far away, the state, I can project the states into something. I communicate. Classically, I communicate, but that gives me a steering of one kind. That is, I turn the steering here and something happens on that part of the system. So this is what Schrodinger says. I have a cute name for this correlated pure states which were used in EPR, that is entanglement. I also have a cute name for the non-local EPR effect, which he calls steering. And I have generalized the idea to allow Alice not just two, but arbitrarily many different measurements. So she can remotely prepare arbitrarily many different sorts of pure states for Bob. To me, the generality of steering suggests that this non-locality is not due to the incompleteness of quantum mechanics. Rather, I think the non-locality is an unavoidable consequence of QMEC. That is, this he says before all these Bell inequality tests were done and so on. Instead, I suspect quantum mechanics will break down for distant entangled systems. That is, if this is not the case, then there should be some other theory, kind of an idea. So then, Alan Aspect says, Schrodinger was right about non-locality being inherent to quantum mechanics by considering a special example of measurement on entangled states. I showed that quantum mechanics cannot be completed as Einstein envisaged. We all know this. That is, no local hidden variable theory can explain the predicted correlations between Bob's and Alice's results. And unfortunately for Schrodinger and Einstein, our experiments have proved that quantum mechanics is correct and its predictions for two distant entangled systems. So the world is non-local. That's what is these two have kind of propagated. So I'll just go ahead. So now let me tell you what is EPR correlations is. For Schrodinger, it is quantum steering, and entanglement is non-separability, today's knowledge, and Bell non-locality. These are some things known. And for all pure bipartite states with perfect detection, we have the state is non-separable. That is, we can separate the features like what is Bell non-locality, what is EPR steering, and what is entanglement. So people tried to kind of understand this because Werner had shown that there exist entangled, but they do not violate Bell non-locality. That's well known. So these things lead to the question, what about steering? Is steering equal to non-separability? Is steering equal to Bell non-locality? These kind of questions were raised somewhere around 1985, kind of 2000, 2011. So this is a paper in 2009. It's somewhere after 2000. So it is something to say. This is kind of non-local EPR steering is not the Bell non-locality kind of a test. What do they do then? So it is something like Alice and Bob share devices. If they are trusted devices, you have transparency here. If they are Bob cannot trust Alice, then this is a black box. And Bob has to verify whether they share an entangled state, whether Alice can steer Bob, or Bob has to verify what is called as a steering inequality. Here what we have is Bell non-locality verification. If at all one is a black box, what needs to be verified by Bob to ensure that it is an entangled state or there is some kind of a steering happening, this kind of a situation has to be used. So now this is supposed to be something like this. Alice says, believe me, I am not a cheat. This is a black box, so we don't know anything. So Bob says, I will believe you only when you can steer my state. So this is, suppose Alice prepares a bipartite quantum state and sends a system to Bob. She is one who sends it to Bob. If their state is entangled and Alice chooses suitable local measurements on her part, she can affect Bob's state remotely. That's what is steering. How would Bob convince himself that his state is indeed steered by Alice's local measurements? He has to verify it because he cannot believe Alice because she is a black box. What does she do? She will only say, I did this measurement and I get this probability for my measurement. So Bob has to note it down and then check his state to conclude. That is, first, after several measurements, he should say, yes, what you did is, what we have is a steering here. What you did steered me, kind of thing. So now, in order to do that, verify his states, Alice performs local measurements. Let us say something like she has a local measurement. And then Bob's conditional states are going to be given by, on Alice's side, there is a measurement. Bob's side, identity. And I have a row AB, trace over A. What I obtain is unnormalized state of Bob. They are called assemblages. And if these unnormalized state obey some kind of local hidden state kind of a relation, it is like, what is a local hidden variable theory? That's a variable. Here I have a local hidden variable state. So how does that come? It takes little more time for you to understand, but this is what is called as, if I have a steering, this Bob's assemblage should not be of this form. So there are inequalities to verify that. So now assemblage is given by this and local hidden state form is given by this. That should be kept in mind. Now, if it is violated, we have CHSH inequality and linear steering inequality, some kind of two measurements at Alice's end, two measurements at Bob's end can be formulated. That is in what is written here, but I don't go into the details of this. So what I want to say is these are published in 2007 when they formulated the proper steering inequality and talked about how do we place our states. So entangled states are bigger and steerable states come in between. Bell non-local states form a smaller set. That is, states which violate Bell non-locality are smaller. So for example, Bell non-locality P is greater than 0.65, let us say, for Werner state. But if your steering exists, P is greater than half itself gives it. Non-separability is P greater than 1/3. Such results are established. So now, can we say there is joint measurability is equivalent to CHSH violation is what Wolf had shown. But now there is a generalization in 2014. A set of POVMs are incompatible if and only if they can be employed to demonstrate quantum steerability. Steerability is a non-local effect, and I am using a measurement which is compatible or incompatible. That is, if Alice uses her POVMs, different measurements, if she uses compatible POVMs, will she be able to steer or no? So there is an equivalence between the two. This is what was shown. If Alice is honest, she indeed prepares a steerable entangled state, part of which she sends to Bob. But when Alice's measurements are compatible, let us say, what is compatibility? I had told you that compatible measurements are coming from a grand POVM. So if it is that way, then Bob's assemblage, one can show that it takes the form which is hidden state form. In other words, if I have compatible measurements at Alice's side, Bob's state does not get steered. Or in other words, there is a converse also to that. If a set of measurements are incompatible, measurements are termed to be incompatible if they are useful to demonstrate EPR steering phenomena. That is also established. So what one says is there is EPR steering and quantum entanglement. If entanglement is there, steered states should have entanglement. But if there is an entanglement, they need not be steerable. There are examples. So incompatible measurements have both ways possible. That is, if you choose incompatible measurements with the help of entanglement, you can always steer EPR, that is, steering is possible. So these things are very important for the development. So what are the kind of conditions imposed? And I think I will not be able to go ahead further. So I want to show you what is entropic uncertainty relation. So this was done in 2010, and this gives you uncertainty relation with entanglement. That is, this is the relation that I would say, that is, I would only show you where Bob is observer, he is a memory, and Alice measures X, Alice measures Z, and their sum of entropies should be greater than or equal to this particular term, which I will not spell out now. This is all, but quantum mechanics adds a term, S of A given B, that is conditional entropy. And if this is negative, for a pure entangled state, this is negative. So this term plus this term will give you 0, or in other words, with the help of entangled states, you can beat XZ uncertainty relations. So these are some other things. So I will just show you. This is 1 minute. So I will just stop with this. So what has come over Heisenberg? He seems to be certain about everything these days. That is, uncertainty can be beaten in the entropic uncertainty relation. And that is what is very crucial for what we say is quantum cryptography, key distribution, and so on. I will not be able to talk more about it. We have worked several intricacies of this aspect, basically. So with this, I stop my talk and take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Urusha Devi. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, you are audible. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, first of all, for joining a bit late. My equipment had some problem.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? I have a couple of questions. Is it
yes?
Is it possible to give a simple example where states are entangled but not steerable?
Yes, Werner state, basically. If you take Werner state and do, say, for example, Alice does XZ measurements and Bob states whether it is steered or not. So it will get steered only when Werner state, whatever is the variable, is larger than 0.5. Entangled when it is 1/3. But it is steerable only when P is larger than 0.5, not less than that. 1/2 and 1/3. 1/3 is entanglement. Greater than 1/3 is entanglement. Greater than half is steerability. Is that fine? Am I making sense? That I showed somewhere. Anyway.
Okay. I have one question. So thank you for a very interesting and informative talk. My question is related with Cramer-Rao bound.
Fine.
So did you study this bound related with Robertson relation when it becomes tight? I mean.
I haven't studied, but that's something of my interest. I have tried to kind of give, if I choose, it's my focus was something like this. If I choose a observable A, so B, I won't fix it. B, I have to fix it using Kramer-Rao bound is what I wanted to say. So if people have given several uncertainty relations, different varieties, I won't take everything. I will take only the A part. And what gives me from Kramer-Rao bound, which is the fitting thing, which gives me exact equality for the Kramer-Rao bound. That's what I was trying, but I didn't do much on it. So,
it would be very
but there is
beneficial
no exact relation. Sorry. For Gaussian states, you get an exact relation.
Yeah. For non-Gaussian, it may have some interesting results. Yeah.
Right. True.
It will be valuable, I think, for quantum metrology and quantum sensing and so on. So,
correct.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question on page number 18 or slide number 18.
Okay, I will go there. Oh, where is my slide? All right, 18.
Yeah, you had constructed the measurement operator.
Here. Okay. Here. Is it seen?
Yeah, this unitary operator that you are constructing.
Right.
So the whole thing is a unitary operation, then where is irreversibility coming in from? And,
whole thing, please tell me again.
So, yeah, this I believe is a measurement process you are doing. You are constructing a unitary operation.
Correct. It's a measurement process. Yes.
Identity stands for the measurement device, and the NA is the measurement operator associated with A, right?
Correct.
So is it the whole thing is a unitary process, or am I missing something?
It's the whole thing is unitary process. Agreed.
So where is irreversibility coming from then when you make a measurement? And
no, I am tracing over these things. No, when I'm doing it, I'm only talking about what is delta eta A and eta B. Where I didn't talk about irreversibility here. It's only the uncertain error and disturbance. What is the relation? That's what is being talked about.
Yeah, any further questions from the audience? Yeah, then we can.
Can I make one clarification? I mean, could you please also remind what topics you did not discuss? I mean, due to the time limit. It was interesting to know.
That was the uncertainty, entropic uncertainty, and what is entropic steering, basically. So entropic uncertainty relation, and it's basically how it gets related to the key rate in quantum cryptography is what I wanted to say. And also, what was Mason-Uffing entropic uncertainty? What is being done in entropic uncertainty with quantum memory? How are they different, basically? And do we have a single system conditional entropy relation? That a single system also can have a conditional entropy kind of a relation. That is, sequential measurements can give you what is called as memory. That's also a memory. So we had done that work. I wanted to kind of elaborate on slightly. That is to say, the Mason-Uffing relation is something like h of x plus h of z is greater than or equal to kind of uncertainty. But if I have a h of x given x bar and h of z given z bar, the relationship will change. And what kind of probability distribution will give you that? So if the probability of p of x bar, p of x prime, if that is classical, you will not be able to violate the usual Mason-Uffing relation. But if it is non-classical, in the sense probability distribution for x and x bar, that is what is memory-like thing. If that is not classical, you are going to violate that Mason-Hufink relation. That itself is nothing but the steering inequality in sequential measurements. This is a little longer, I agree, but that's what I wanted to show.
Thank you very much.